Peggy Fair, and thanks for joining us on the Understand Photography show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Creativity in the garden is our topic today with Jamie Konarski Davidson, so stay tuned. You know, it's really hot this summer, so it's a great time to take our 4 weeks to proficiency in photography class. It's an interactive class, so yes, it's online, but you have interaction with me, you have homework, you have your homework critiqued, you have me to ask questions to. It's such a good class. It's going to give you such a great foundation in photography because you're going to learn to shoot in manual in the very first class, and then we build from there. You're going to learn the composition rules. You're going to learn lighting, including a little bit about flash photography. And then, of course, the last class, I call it the techie stuff, where you learn white balance and metering modes and all kinds of stuff like that. 4 weeks to proficiency in photography. And remember, our motto at Understand Photography is we simplify the technical. And we really, really do. That's how we've been able to continue on all this time. People really enjoy the way we teach because we do simplify. Our tours, day tours from Naples, Florida, you know, in the surrounding area within a couple of hours, and our multi-day tours are starting back up. So on our day tours, you have a choice of coming with us in the van, sanitized van, wearing masks, or meeting us at the locations. So check out, you know, on understandphotography.com, click on tours and classes and check out what we have coming up. We're doing the dome homes, we're doing tonight photography, long exposure photography. October, we're doing the Apalachicola Forgotten Coast tour. So we don't have a lot on the schedule just yet, but we're starting to add things onto the schedule. So it's a great way to practice your photography. My guest today is Jamie Konarski Davidson. Now, it took a tragedy in Jamie's life to really push her to get into photography. She always loved photography, but after surviving breast cancer, she decided, hey, it's time to buy that expensive camera and, you know, feed her soul. And thank God she did, because a couple of years later, she had, you know, it reoccurred, or is that what you call it? Anyway, she got it again. So she survived that, but she survived it because of her camera and the love she has for photography. It really does feed your soul. Our topic today is creativity in the garden and flower photography. You know, our flower photography shows seem to be really big hits. Jamie has a lot of great advice. I met her from Gary Farber from Hunt's Photo and Video, so we do a little plug for them in this show. She's really fascinating. She has a lot of really good concrete ways for you to become more creative. If you're the kind of person who feels like, oh, I don't know how to be creative, she's like giving you really concrete ideas on what to do. So welcome, Jamie.
Hi.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now tell our audience a little bit about you.
Well, I used to say that I'm an outdoor and nature photographer based out of Greenville, North Carolina, but I sort of have evolved into photographing a lot of different things, including old cars, trucks, barns, buildings, and things like that. But my favorite thing to photograph is flowers, and I'm still based in North Carolina.
I love North Carolina. It's so beautiful there.
It is.
So, so let's talk about, you know, the topic of our talk today is creativity in the garden. Mm-hmm. And now, one of the things that you say is the best tools are between your ears. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, you know, it's not so much the tools that we have in our hands, the cameras, the lenses, and all of those things. It's really our minds, our imagination, how we think, how we view the world, and all of us view the world differently. We all come from different backgrounds. And so that's what makes us unique, and also has the potential to make our images unique, as long as we're not trying to be someone other than who we are.
Okay, so for example, what do you mean?
Well, if you're trying to emulate someone else, a photographer you admire, and you're just trying to get their shot, then you're not thinking out of the box and using your own perspective and your own life experience to maybe approach a similar subject in a different way.
Okay, so let's say I'm just starting off with, you know, flower photography or landscape photography. You know, how can I put that into play? Like, I don't know what to take. That's why I'm copying off of people.
Right, right. Well, and when you're learning, that's an excellent way, you know, to learn, is to look at different photography, see whose approach to, for example, flowers you like, you appreciate, you want to learn more about how to do that. You know, you've got to learn from other people by learning how they do those things. But then once you get comfortable with the techniques, all the, you know, the buttons to push, the settings and things like that, then that's where you start to think about, well, what do I like about this flower? And yes, now I have the techniques in the bag, basically, and how am I going to use them to put out a flower, for example, that an image that expresses how I feel about that. You know, did I like the petals? Did I like the color? Did I like the texture? What was it that made me stop in the first place? You know, what drew me to that flower? Why that one versus, you know, the 600 others that are in the same field? You know, that type of thing. So thinking about why you choose one flower over another, just using flowers as examples, you know, why that one? I find that the more you can articulate why you like a particular subject, the easier it is to start photographing it in a way that expresses that same thought process.
Okay, all right. So asking yourself questions is a good
Yes.
way to, like, think of more creative ways to.
Yeah, it is, because, you know, if I just, you know, I mean, I can spend 2 hours with one flower. So, you know, I may be an anomaly in that way, but I'm going to have 2 hours worth of exploration of that. And so you're not going to see the same picture. You know, I hate to pick on bird photographers, but, you know, if I see 20 bird photographs on social media, for example, and the difference is that the head turned this way, they looked up, and, you know, it's the same bird in the same basic position, then I always say, pick your best one, pick your favorite. Which one do you like the best? Which one expresses what you like most about what was happening, what your subject is? So it could be a bird, it could be a tree, it could be a barn, a car, you know, but, you know, we're talking about flowers. So why one flower in a field? Why'd you pick that one? And so it's about working inward from that. Here's the flower that I picked. Now I'm going to work and show myself first, because I'm the first person I need to please, right? I'm not looking to impress other people. You know, I always say when I'm presenting images, and even just in general, you know, I didn't take any of the images that I've ever taken for other people. I take them for myself, to express myself. It's my therapy. It's a you know, photography for me is a soul feeder, and if I just photograph subjects so that other people will like them, then I'm not feeding my inner spirit, basically.
Okay, all right. Do you think that takes time, though, when somebody just starting out? I think.
Yes, it does, because, you know, I mean, I started out and I knew nothing. I mean, zero. I think we all start at, you know, the flat line of I know nothing, but I knew what I liked, and I wrote poetry when I was growing up, and so I had sort of a poetic approach to the things that I was attracted to, and I could express those thoughts maybe a little easier than someone who comes from I use the example of like engineers. You know, there's this and this and this and this. So here is A, you know, and it's supposed to be like this because, well, I'm like, well, this is what I liked, and this is why I liked it, and here it is.
Now,
If you like it, that's great. If you don't, that's fine with me too.
I felt like I enjoyed photography more after I got educated.
Mm-hmm.
When I understood the composition rules, I started taking better pictures, and then I started enjoying it more, and then I started getting more creative. And it's so funny because people fight that stuff. They're like, I don't
Yeah.
want to, I don't want to know the rules because I like my photography, but
Yeah.
you like it better when you know the rules, I think, and then you can break them intelligently.
Exactly. Um, yeah, I mean, we all have to start somewhere, and for me, I do a lot of teaching with workshops and classes and things like that, and the worst thing I think that I see other people experience is not knowing. We've got our imagination, we've got all those um, natural tools in our head and within ourselves, but not knowing what we have in our hands is a hindrance. So if you don't know where this button is or that button is, or how you change it so that you can get the setting that you want, shallow depth of field, you want everything in focus, those are the things that with a better understanding will help you grow and find your way of expressing what you like in any area of photography.
Boy, do I agree with you, because the more I learn about photography, the more creative I get, because I can.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can do, like you said, the shallow depth of field, or the, well, we're going to talk about a bunch of different techniques soon,
Mm-hmm.
but,
Sure.
once you learn all those, then you have a whole, like a toolbox,
Exactly.
I could do
Exactly.
intentional
Before you
camera
pull out.
movement on this or whatever.
Yep. Yep.
All right. So walk me through, let's say that you're going to, you're coming to visit me, and you go to
Mm-hmm.
Naples Botanical Garden.
Right.
Walk me through what you do.
Well, that would be a first time for me. So, sometimes first times in any location, it can be overwhelming, particularly if it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And what I have found is that I've learned, and this takes practice and it takes a little bit of discipline. I've learned to accept that I am not going to photograph every single beautiful thing in any one garden. I can't even photograph every single beautiful thing that's in my back patio, and I've got enough to keep me busy for weeks and weeks, So what I try to do is that I would rather come out of the botanical garden with depth and of exploration of a few subjects and do a really good job with them than just go bing, bing, bing. I got everything in the garden, and then go home and I'm not happy because I didn't spend any time with any one subject. So I wasted my time. I wasted that opportunity. So I go in not expecting to photograph everything, but to find a few things that I'm really excited about. Like my favorite color is purple. So if I see purple flowers, I'm gonna be drawn to the purple flowers first. I love ferns. I love palms for the patterns. So I may be drawn in that direction, but I'm drawn with, I guess, and this is a long time of developing it, but I'm drawn with some level of intention. If it's a purple flower, well, is it draping? Is it all clustered? What is its characteristics? The palms, they have so many different intricate patterns. And so I might approach it first with patterns and then kind of expand from there.
Okay. All right. So you're getting there, and you're just going to kind of see the lay of the land, and then
yeah, if it's
zoom in on a couple of different things, three
yeah,
different things, and just spend some time on
yeah, a
each.
lot of time,
Okay.
a
Like,
lot.
what's a lot of time?
Well, I can spend, like I said, 2 hours on one flower. But if I only have 2 hours, then I'm going to kind of divide it a little bit. I'm going to be a little bit more discriminating. And maybe I'll spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes with each subject.
Okay.
Depends. Yeah.
And so when you're spending this time, you're just moving around, you're changing your composition, you're doing different techniques.
Yeah, and I may, sometimes I go into a garden and I say, I'm going to use only my lens, baby. Well, then it's which one, or which two might I bring in, and then that helps kind of give a path again of what can I do with this and how will it work really well with the subjects that I find. So I'm not going to necessarily do a lot of big picture things. I'll go in for the macro and the close-up and things like that and work in that way.
So let's talk about gear for a minute. Now, we were introduced from Hunt's Photo and Video, so we're going to give them a little plug here because, whatever you talk about, I'm sure Hunt sells it.
Yes, I'm sure they do.
So what kind of, now you said that you're not going to bring all your gear into the garden. You'll just choose a couple lenses, but in general, what's a good kit for somebody who's into like flower photography?
Well, I mean, if you really love getting into flowers, the details and everything like that, I definitely would recommend a macro lens.
Okay.
That's one thing. But then if you go in with, let's just say, a Tamron 90mm macro, you can do portraits with that. You can do sort of big pictures, but the angle of view is not such that you can get the bigger views, the grander pictures. So that you might think about a 24-70 or an all-in-one that allows you to have the wide angle and then zoom in. I also add accessories like to get me even closer. So for example, Canon has a 500D close-up lens. It actually looks like a fancy filter that screws on the end of your lens, and that will allow whatever lens you have, it'll put you closer to your subject. It'll magnify. So if you like those details and you don't want to bring too many things, then I would say you could bring your all-in-one or your wider angle lens and bring that, and it'll get you closer, but it won't get you, unless it's a telephoto where you can zoom in past where you can actually physically reach, because we don't want to be stepping in flower beds and things like that. So telephoto can be helpful. That will help you get in as well.
Okay. All right. So as far as lenses, if you're putting together your little kit, in general, you're going to have a good macro lens. And do you like this Tamron lens?
I do.
You're a Canon shooter?
Nope, I'm primarily a Nikon shooter, but I do have a Canon converted to infrared. So I'm sort of a mixed bag.
You go both ways.
I do. That's terrible.
It's so funny. When I started teaching in 2009, I was a Canon person all my life, and I've been a photographer most of my life, and I was so terrified of the people coming in with Nikons, and thank God I started learning to teach then, because now people come in with all kinds of cameras, Olympus and Fuji, and it's like but now it's not so scary to me, but it was scary back then because of course, Nikon and Canon, everything screws on the opposite way. The buttons are, everything's opposite. It drives you crazy. And back then, even the meter was even opposite back then. Have you been a Nikon shooter a long time?
Yes. Yeah.
I remember the meter, the plus sign was on the other side.
Yeah.
So that Tamron.
I go back to film days.
Pardon me?
I go back to film days.
Okay. Yeah, me too. So that Tamron lens, they probably make that for Nikon or Canon.
They sure do.
You like that lens as a macro lens?
I do. I really do. Yeah.
90mm Tamron.
Yeah, Tamron 90. The Nikon makes the 105. The Canon makes a 100, and then of course there's Sony and Fuji, and I don't know all of those, but
I don't know those either. But
they're available.
The 100mm macro Canon lens is amazing. Sure. It's a great lens. But I would imagine the Tamron's a lot less money.
It is. It is.
And if you like it, you think it's a good lens.
It is. It actually rates about the same as the Nikon.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's impressive.
yeah.
And what about your lens babies? Can you tell us about those?
Uh, I
How
have a
many do you
lot.
have?
A
Oh, a
lot.
lot.
Yeah, I have a roller bag full of lens babies going back to, their second version. Almost all of the legacy optics for the Composer. But if I'm going out in the field now, my first picks would be the Velvet 56 and it would be three picks. Be the Velvet 56, the Soul 45, and probably in the Composer, it would be like the Sweet 50 or the Sweet 80. So, yeah.
Okay, so tell me about, what's different about all these lens babies? I mean, a lens baby,
Well,
I don't have a good understanding. I actually tried at a conference I was speaking, but
mhm,
I went, to take this class on flower photography, and
sure.
she had all the lens babies, and I tried
Mhm,
several of them, and
yeah.
I didn't get it.
Well, they're all manual focus, so you've got to know that going in. They're all manual focus, but each set of lens babies, Velvet, Sweets, etc., they all give a different effect. Like an overall glow is the Velvet. The Sweets have a sweet round spot, and then the soft focus around, depending on your aperture. And the Soul, which is a new one, has like Venetian blind type of things that you can move out of the way. But if they're in front of the lens, it gives a really neat effect in the background. So it's really, if you're going to choose a lens baby, you choose it for the effect that it gives. And the beautiful thing about lens babies, and I'm not here necessarily to sell lens babies, but I do love them, is that in camera you get it. Once you get it, once you get used to how it works, it's like you hardly have to do any editing.
Oh, that's
So,
nice.
and you can't get the same effect with just a straight macro lens. It's just
Okay.
not as easy. You have to work really hard.
All right, now tell me about the close-up lens that you screw on the front of your camera. Is that,
Mhm.
or your front of your lens, I mean, is that,
Yeah.
is that important to get like a brand name, or,
No.
how do you know what kind to get?
Well, I recommend my first choice is the Canon. It's called the 500D, and so it's they call it a lens because it's two pieces of glass that are corrected for distortion. But I like it because even though it's a little bit heavier, it's small, and if I don't want to carry a macro lens, I can use that with step-up rings on any lens that I carry. So it's a way for me to get in closer to a subject. And there are other companies that make these things. Familiar with Marumi. ProMaster also has come out with those, and I know that Hunts Photo is a ProMaster dealer, so that's something to look at as well. But you can use them on any lens. So me using a Canon 500D doesn't negatively impact my Tamron lens or my Nikon lenses. It's just Canon makes it.
Right, and that doesn't have a specific mount. It
Nope.
just screws on the front. And
Yeah.
if anybody's not familiar with step-up rings, we do have an article on understandphotography.com. I'll put a link, but do you want to give a little overview of what a step-up ring is?
Well, I mean, basically, it's a way for you to, like, for example, I have a 77 millimeter 500D close-up lens. So if my lens baby Velvet, for example, has a 62 millimeter filter size, I can use a step-up ring that takes it from 62 millimeters to 77, and I can use the 500D.
So it's just these little things that screw onto each side of the lens,
It's an adapter, basically.
and
To
and you
use.
can get a nice little set of those. I'm sure Hunt sells
Yeah.
those,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, they do.
All
Yeah.
right. What else? So your lenses You need a
tripod.
camera. Does it matter if you have a crop frame or a full frame camera?
You know, no. It just doesn't. You know, I shot for 10 years with a crop sensor camera. It was a Nikon D2X, and nobody ever asked me, is that a crop sensor? Is it full frame? No, they asked, how did you do that?
Yeah.
You know, the question was never how many megapixels. That's another, you know, funny question. Is it full frame or crop? Those things don't matter. What matters is what you put in the box, you know. That's it. That's it.
All right. What about other accessories? Tripod, of course. Right?
Yes.
Do you
Yeah.
always use a tripod?
Most of the time, I would say percentage-wise, unless I'm like down on the ground and, you know, rolling and wanting to get, you know, really super close and a very, very low angle. Or if I can't get in position with the tripod, then I'll handhold. But I'm not a statue. I breathe, I press the button, and all of that does not lend itself to having sharp, particularly macro and close-up images. You know, you use the regular, like, well, what shutter speed do I need for minimum shutter speed? I'm aware of that. But I'm also aware that when I put the camera on the tripod and I find a subject and I'm working it, that the tripod allows me to refine the image, to really hone in on particular areas that I find interesting or important and that need to be in focus. And if I'm not on a tripod and I look at the back and then I go, you know, to the viewfinder again, I'm never in the same place. So I'm not refining, I'm just taking the picture.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation for tripod, or that's a very tough, tripods are tough.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, you know, in a perfect world, nobody would need a tripod. We'd all be, you know, just perfect hand holders. But that's just not the way it works. So I recommend that you get a tripod that is tall enough so that when you're standing, you do not have to raise the center column. You know, I have a little speech, you know, that I give in my classes, but, you know, if you have to raise that center post, you're really basically wasting your time with a tripod because you're not using it at its best point of stability.
Right.
So tall enough. I recommend the ball heads. The ball heads are way more flexible to me than the geared things, but everybody has their preference and they all have different needs. But for me, the ball head, so tall enough. Carbon fiber is definitely a lighter way to go. You've got to be able to carry it. And if it's too heavy, you're not going to carry it. It's going to be in the car.
Yeah.
And I can remember way back, you know, not using a tripod and being fully aware that I chose not to use it, even though it was like 50 feet away from me, because I didn't want to bring it out of the car because it was heavy and I didn't like it. And I missed the shot that I would have gotten had I just, you know, carried it. So tall enough. Flexibility in terms of getting down to the ground, if that's what you like to do, and the ball head.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other pieces of equipment do you use?
Oh, diffuser and reflector set. The 5-in-1 diffuser reflector set for controlling light so that I can even out shadows, so that in the middle of the day, if it's not an overcast day, I can photograph the flowers and control the light so that I'm not dealing with harsh shadows.
So you're putting like a shade over,
Yep.
or
Yep.
diffuser, or one or the other.
Yeah, it's a diffuser, and the diffuser, you know, a lot of people think, well, I just hold it in one place, but the closer you move the diffuser to your subject, the more light gets in. So it also allows you to light your subject the way you might want it to be. If you're going to use a diffuser, you probably want to be on a tripod because we don't have 5 hands.
So you're saying the closer the diffuser is to, let's say, the flower, the more light.
Correct.
So as you move it higher or away from the flower, you have less light.
You do. It still is diffused and it's even lighting. at a certain point, it's more like shade, but not dark shade. It's just less light coming through. So
And
it allows flexibility in terms of lighting.
how do
And
you stick it there? I mean, do you hold it while you're taking a
yep,
picture? Or,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's sometimes it's an exercise in acrobatics, but yeah, you know.
What about those clamps? Do you ever use the clamps?
I do. I have a bunch of the clamps as well, and you know, I use them. I use them when I can and when I have them with me. You know, like I said, you know, I can't carry everything into the field, so I'm selective. If I'm doing things at home, I'm more likely to use the clamp, and I know that seems silly, but I'm more likely to use it because I can. Um, I'm not in a hurry, you know, and but they do come in handy. You can use the clamp to hold small reflectors to bounce in light, so that comes in handy that way. Um, but yeah, I need, sometimes I need a schlepper if I was gonna, you know, have somebody with me and carry all my stuff and hand me, you know, this and hand me that. So
Oh, wouldn't
I've
that
got
be
to figure
nice?
out how to do it.
That would be nice. Right.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
else for what else for equipment? Because we got lenses, camera, tripod, diffuser reflectors.
Well, I use a circular polarizing filter most of the time. And that is, you know, circular polarizers, just like polarized sunglasses, you know, everything looks better through them. Um, you know, reduce glare. And if you're doing landscapes and scenics, it's going to add some contrast and saturation to your image. But all flowers, all leaves have some level of gloss and sheen. And so the polarizer allows you to control that. If you think of magnolia leaves, they're very, very shiny. And so if they're very, very shiny and you have no way of adjusting that shine, then that's what you get. But with the polarizer, you can control the level of sheen that's in your image.
Okay. And by the way, audience, we also have a whole article that Joe Fitzpatrick wrote about circular polarizer lenses too. I'll put
Mm-hmm.
that link in the show notes on
Yep.
understandphotography.com. All right, what else?
Uh,
Flash?
no, I have to reacquaint myself with my flash and become friends again. I used to use it all the time when I was photographing flowers in the film days for slides and things like that. But I stopped when I realized that I liked the, you know, the what I could get with the diffuser and the reflector. And I also use little small flashlights too, so you can pinpoint the
Okay.
light. And the other thing, particularly with film, you never knew what you were getting. So you were just hoping, you know, that you know, when you got your images back, that it worked. At least that was me. So I liked the idea of being able to see exactly what the light was and where I needed to bounce some more of the light. And I just got used to that. But yeah, I've sort of have that on my list to become friends with my flash again.
All right. Is there anything else that we're missing for equipment?
Oh gosh.
Probably, right? If you think of it while we're talking.
Probably. The one thing I would say is to bring into the field, you know, particularly in warm weather, you know, bring a towel. Bring a towel to, you know, wipe your brow, and, you know, bring water, drink, you know. We don't think about that, but then all of a sudden we get back to the car after 2 or 3 hours in any one garden, for example, and thirsty as all get out, and I don't want to drop in a garden just because I don't have water and I'm too hot. So
Good point. Yeah, that's excellent advice.
yeah,
I mean, it's not just for me, you know, of course, living in Florida, I'm always like, wear a hat, wear a hat,
yeah,
get a hat.
yeah,
That's actually why I grew my bangs out, because I'm just trying to keep that sun off my face. I didn't
yeah,
realize, I was never a hat person, but I didn't realize how
mm,
much cooler you are with a good straw hat.
yeah,
It makes your whole
yeah,
body cooler. Plus it keeps all
yeah,
that sun damage off of you.
yeah, exactly.
All right, well, so let's talk about, you know, so when you plan a photo shoot,
Hmm.
you told us what you do. Basically,
Yeah,
you know, you're kind of walking around, you're beelining into a few different things and then
Hmm.
spending time with them.
Yeah.
How do you spend an hour or 2 hours on one flower? Like, what are you doing? Can you give us some specific examples?
Oh, well, I know, you're kind of coming off of a program that I gave you on creativity in the garden. So I experiment with different techniques like motion blurs, multiple exposures. I try to start with the um, bigger picture, kind of
Mhm.
the portrait, and refine that and find a good angle. And then I'm looking at petals. I'm looking at the center. I'm looking at leaves and just little things. And so then I'm just finding smaller stories within, say, that you know one flower, one bush, whatever. Um, and and really, it's just continuing to explore different angles, different lighting. What happens if I diffuse, not diffuse? Where do I bounce the light? How does that work? Um, I never, I really, okay, I should say hardly ever leave a subject having taken less than 15 or 20 images. So when I see someone when I'm teaching and they go from one subject to the next to the next to the next to and then there's three in a row, I'm like, oh wow, you must have really liked that, because there's three pictures. But what I have found is that the longer I stay, the more I see. It's like having a conversation with someone. If I just say, hi, I'm Jamie, and they say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and then we part ways, we don't know anything but each other's name.
Mhm.
And so it's that having a conversation with my subjects, and, flowers are my favorite subjects. So I'm like, oh, wow, look at how the light is, overcast days are beautiful for flower photography. I mean, you can spend all day doing that. But, I don't know. It's like meeting someone and they have a smile that just lights up the room. That's the thing that you remember. So when I'm looking at subjects, I'm thinking, well, where's that smile that lights up my room? And I go for that. And so I use the different creative techniques, like multiple exposures in camera, like motion blurs, to go beyond what we see in just the reality portion of it. And then I go deep. I go really in tight to the abstract level with petals and things like that. So I really explore. When I have time to spend that much, uh, you know, when I'm not in a hurry, uh, uh, and on any kind of timetable, I want to spend as much time as possible. And I want to leave knowing that I'm leaving with something that I really love.
Now let's explore some of those ideas, because I know until I knew a lot of these techniques, I would get really bored because I couldn't think of anything else to do. And
Right.
then once I started learning more and more techniques, I could sit forever like you are. So
Hmm.
let's talk about, like you said, multiple exposures for one thing. Now,
Right.
how do you do that?
Well, so that's something that you can do, um, you know, outside of your camera, but most cameras now have features that you can select in one frame, putting, let's say, anywhere from 2 to 10 frames in one.
Oh, cool.
And with mirrorless, I have found that you can actually, most of the cameras will allow you to see where you're placing the next and the next and the next and the next frame, so that you kind of have an idea of where you're going. With one of my cameras, I couldn't see, so I would take a lot of them, and I don't mind doing that because every one of those multiple exposures are different. Um, uh, let's say I have a flower that has a lot of petals and patterns. And so what I'm trying to do is figure out, well, okay, if it has a lot of petals and patterns, like say zinnias or dahlias, for example, um, I'm going to try to stay centered. Sometimes I'll use a tripod, other times I'll hand hold. That's one of the get off the tripod kind of things, a lot. But, you know, how many do I really need? Do I need 10? No, probably not. So maybe it'll be 6 or 7 or 5 or 6, whatever. And I'll just take one picture like this, then turn the camera again and again and again, and create the series. And then the camera generates an image and I go, oh, well, I need to change this, you know, approach or the angle. So it's kind of fun because you don't know exactly what you're going to get right away. And then you can just keep doing it until you get what you like.
Now, let me ask you this, because I have only done multiple exposures of my camera one time, and I don't remember how to do it. But I remember it's a menu item.
Yes.
And then what does it give you, like 2 seconds to take a picture and then take the next, or how does that work?
No, you can take the series. You can just, you know, bam, 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 you know, press the button, etc. And then you just wait for it to generate. Some cameras will only allow you to do 2. Others 3 or 4. So I had one camera that only allowed me to do 3, and I was so bummed because I was used to 10. And so what I figured out for the 3 in camera multiples is that I needed a subject that had a lot of detail. For example, fern, you know, or a flower bed full of flowers, you know. Then I can generate kind of a design and a pattern and kind of this just artistic interpretation. But only 3 on certain subjects that are very simple and clean doesn't always work. It can, but you have to work harder.
Okay, all right, and then you can see it when it's done. So you're just you take a picture, turn the camera, take the picture, turn the camera, and then you just experiment in the way you turn the camera. Okay.
Yeah. You know, it's called play, right? You know, I want to get something I like, so I'm gonna do it until I get what makes me happy.
That's really cool. I'm gonna try it again. I don't know if how many mine does. I don't remember. But what about? I guess this is a similar subject, but it's like intentional camera movement.
Yes.
Now, we had a whole show with Charles Needles about that, and I will put that, let me write that down, and I'll put that link in the show notes as well. But what do you do with intentional camera movement, and what does that mean for our audience who doesn't know?
Well, that means that for me, that means that I'm off the tripod. You know, I've got the camera in my hand. I've picked kind of a position or a subject, and I pick a shutter speed that's slow enough for me to create a sense of movement. And sometimes the movement is slow because the area is small. Other times it's a little bit faster. For example, I can use an example of like cypress trees and azaleas in South Carolina. You know, so I'm looking to create an abstract that is slow enough and yet fast enough not to capture great detail, but to capture the essence of a place. So I can think of one image that I did that had green grass in the foreground, pink and white azaleas next to a stand of cypress trees. And so it was just to move up and down, and it could be a quarter second, it can be faster or slower depending on your light levels, what effect you want to have. But most of the time, these in-camera motion things, intentional camera motion, you're creating abstracts. You're creating a sense of a place or a sense of a subject, but not with any great detail.
Okay, that's fun. That's fun to experiment with too, right?
Yeah, and you can do it anywhere. So it's not restricted to trees and flowers. You can do it in the cityscapes and you know, on the shorelines. You can do it really with any subject.
Well, for me, what I've always done, and this whole, like Charles Needle has these really cool effects, like Monet effects and things like that I had never thought about. But, the more, I think it's more common to do like zoom blur or horizontal blur or vertical blur. That's something that we do quite often and sometimes comes out so cool.
Yeah, it really does. And, that's the whole thing with movement of the camera in any direction, is that we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for something that makes us happy, that feels good, rather than, well, this is technically, spot on. Well, my background in photography, I started when the buzzword was tack sharp, tack sharp, tack sharp. It's not tack sharp. And I'm like, well, after a while, and this took time for me to accept, but after a while, I realized, I'm not a tack sharp kind of girl. So this is who I am, and this is what my image looks like. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing should be tack sharp. The thing that needs to be sharp in an image needs to be sharp.
Okay.
But that's a creative choice. If it's not a complete motion blur, our eye wants something to rest on and come back to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of what we have to figure out. Do I need this? Do I need to add that tack sharp point of reference, or am I okay with the essence?
We had a boat trip. We have this really cool, it used to be somebody's house, and it was 6 domes, the one house was, and then it got washed out. He couldn't get a permit for the seawall, I guess. So it's now in the middle of the ocean, or the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
And we only have 4 left because that last hurricane took down 2 of the domes.
Wow.
But we went on the boat, because you have to take a boat to go take pictures of it. We did that last week, and I was, I've done it many, many times. I've taken pictures of those, and so I was trying to figure out what to do, and I did the zoom blur, and it was really cool. I never would have thought of that, to do that with the dome home in the middle of the water, but it came out pretty cool.
Exactly, and it just creates a whole different interpretation of a subject that maybe everybody's photographed in one particular way. So if you put a little twist or a spin on it, or a zoom on it, you have an image that nobody else can do in the same way, because they're not there at the same time you are.
Yeah. Yeah. What other things do you do?
Well, with the flowers in particular, the thing that I probably do a great deal in terms of working inward is selective focus. So really finding just one little edge of a petal, one little edge or point of the center of a flower or a leaf, and really kind of going for lines and curves, and really more softness than sharpness, but yet still enough to suggest that it's a flower. Might not be that it suggests a specific flower, but flowers are just beautiful. And so I'm just looking for a different way to express that.
So when you say selective focus, are you having like a really shallow depth of field?
Very shallow depth of field. So I'm choosing, for example, 2.8 or wider. So the lens babies go to 1.6, right? So even more shallow than the 2.8, and getting very close. And the closer you get, the shallower your depth of field is anyway. So, that's the selective focus. And I'm really just kind of pointing out things that are interesting to me. Like if I approach a rose and it's got a nice little curve in a petal, then eventually I'm going to get to that curve in the petal, and I'm not going to worry about the detail on the rest of the petal. It's just going to be that edge and that curve and the color.
Okay, that's so cool. All right, so we said selective focus, multiple exposures, intentional camera movement. Now you talked a little earlier about abstract pictures. Is that kind of the same thing as the selective focus?
It can be. It can be. It depends on the subject. It depends on that it depends answer. It's true. It depends. If I'm photographing a flower and I see that a bee's coming to the flower. You know, I've got dahlias on the back patio a lot of times toward the end of the summer. And so the bees are attracted to it while I'm photographing a petal, you know, in very shallow depth of field, and then a bee comes in. So now I've got to say, well, I really want that all of the rest of the flower to be soft, but I want the bee to be sharp, or else it's kind of a waste, you know, unless I do something crazy with the bee. So then it's a depends. But yeah, I go with the flow a lot. So I don't go with, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. It's like, well, okay, I've done these techniques, and then I'll look over at another flower, like I get bunches of them, and I do a lot of work on my back patio or inside, and I'll be thinking that I'm starting with this one flower, and then all of a sudden something catches my eye with another one. And so I'm off to the races with another, and I leave the other one behind. I'm like, sorry.
Distracted easily, don't you? No.
No, well, yeah, after a certain point, I'm looking for something else to explore. Yeah.
For me, when I get really bored is when I start getting more creative, because I'm just sitting there. Like if I have nothing else to do, then I'm, you know, maybe I'll try it upside down. Maybe I wouldn't think of those things normally, but if I'm just sitting there with nothing else to do, it makes me more creative.
Oh, sure. And, you know, these days right now, you know, where are you going to go? You know, 2 of my favorite gardens are closed, have been closed, and I'm, you know, dying for them to be open, but they're not. So I'm going to find other things to photograph, you know.
And another thing you put in your notes was shooting through different things.
Yeah, so shooting through is a technique also where you have a subject that is let's just say in between some other things. It could be leaves, it could be petals, it could be, you know, bushes, and so you have the subject, you have edges. You know, I've done edges before, but there's stuff in front of the lens, and as long as the lens is you're too close, you're within the minimum focusing distance of the particular lens, then it creates this soft blur, and it creates kind of a nice little vignette. And then that softness in the front helps to highlight and lead the viewer into the frame, in toward the subject that you want to photograph.
Yeah, I like actually using the same color flower, because it almost gives it like a, I don't know, like a glowy look to the flower that you're actually focusing on. Go ahead.
It does. And the other thing too is that you know, if they're your flowers, or as long as if you're in a public garden, really don't pick the flowers. It's just not cool. You know, it's a big fat no-no. But if they're your flowers, you can take something that complements a subject, that maybe there's a distraction within the frame that you cannot compose out, but you like the angle, you like everything about what you have except for that one little corner. You pull something else and you put it right close to the lens, and it creates just that color wash that finishes the image, and it allows you to capture the whole thing in the camera without having to say, well, I'll fix that later. You know, that's the other thing, is I tried to do everything I can in the field, so that what I'm bringing back onto the computer is something that I'm going to maybe be excited about, but also know that I worked as hard as I possibly could to get the best results. And now I'm in the refining stage in post-processing. And that's a whole nother creative ball of wax too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to get as much in camera as you can, because
absolutely.
I mean, sometimes I'm in the mood to edit, and a lot of times I'm not.
Right.
So it's nice to have something that's nice no matter what.
Well, and that, you know, going back to the lens babies, you know, that's what Lens Baby can give you, is something that you have to just minimally edit. You know, if you're not paying attention to composition, if you're not paying attention to exposure, if you're not paying attention to your background, or distracting distractions within the frame, then those are all things that you're going to have to go and work on later. So, maybe the first 4 or 5 frames for me might be looking for those things. What's my best angle? Are there any distractions? Can I compose them out? What can I do to eliminate those? And then have a good starting place. I think if we don't do that, we're just being sloppy and lazy. And that doesn't sound nice, but it's true, because I know I've been sloppy and I've been lazy, and I don't like it because it creates more work. So I'd much rather be out and work a little harder in the field in a place where I'm happy than to sit in the office and go, oh, if I had just moved, a half an inch, this would have been this. I wouldn't have had to do this, or it would have worked, right? If this is not good, I just needed, to like a quarter turn, and this would have been perfect. So that's the work in the field that is so important.
So take your time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. One more thing on your list was the infrared.
Yeah. So when the light in the field is, let's just say, crappy, it's harsh, it's contrasty, it's the kind of light that's too bright and just horrible for color photography. That's where infrared allows me to photograph all day long. There are times of the day when I can shoot infrared in color, same subjects, same areas, same light, and it works out beautifully. And then other times where the light is just terrible. And if you don't shoot infrared, then you take a nap, you go back to your car, you go home, you eat. And if I'm out photographing, I want to be out all day. And so that's just the transition. So in the middle of the day with the harsh lighting, infrared shines, and it creates images that make ordinary things really pretty amazing. I've done it in the gardens. I've done some macro and close-up work with infrared, but it's great for landscape, scenics, forests, gardens is great in gardens as well because there's a lot of green. And it's just one more thing. Yeah.
All right. I just looked at the time, so we need to start wrapping it up. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, I do workshops, I teach classes, I love sharing what I do, and I've got some things coming up in the fall, and I'm going to do them.
Give us a quick overview of what you have coming up. This is going to air towards the end of July, so what do you have coming up in August, September, October?
Actually, August right now, it was not going to be a quiet month. It was going to be busy, but it's going to be kind of maybe my regroup month. But in September, I'm doing Finger Lakes. I'm doing West Virginia in October, and in November, I'm doing Chincoteague, Eastern Shore.
Is that where the horses are?
Yep.
That's so cool. Do you photograph the horses? You photograph the horses at Chincoteague?
Yeah, when they show up, they're nature, so they're going to be present when they decide they're present.
And what's your website?
It's newlifephotos.com.
Newlifephotos.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy.
And I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, and so if you're interested, you can find me.
Is it New Life Photos on Facebook and Instagram?
Yes. without giving you the all of the information, yes.
I'll tell you what, I'll put the links in the show notes on understandphotography.com and make it easy on everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on the Understand Photography show.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
It was really interesting. I enjoyed it. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to leave us a review on I think it's called Apple Podcasts now. That really helps us come up in the search engines, which of course always helps us. I'm Peggy Farron. Thanks for watching the Understand Photography Show. We'll see you next week.
Get up!